Jimmy Swaggart is an American Pentecostal pastor and televangelist who achieved considerable popularity in the 1970s and 1980s. Born on March 15, 1935, he is known for his charismatic preaching style and his musical ministry. Swaggart's rise to fame began with his nationally syndicated television show, The Jimmy Swaggart Crusade, which attracted millions of viewers. However, his public image was tarnished by controversies, including a sex scandal in the 1980s that led to his downfall. Despite this, he continues to preach and perform to this day, although his audience has dwindled significantly. Join us as we explore the fascinating story behind his struggles. You will surely be surprised by what we reveal below. Early life. Born in Faraday, Louisiana, a little hamlet with strong Pentecostal Christian origins. On March 15, 1935, his early life and would always be influenced by religion and music, which also shape his destiny. Growing up in a very Pentecostal, very religious family where faith permeated everyday life, Swaggart. He also actively participated in the religious fervor of the Assemblies of God, a Pentecostal organization renowned for stressing supernatural abilities such divine healing and tongue-speaking. Swaggart's life and career would revolve around this spiritual environment, which greatly shapes his destiny as a preacher and televangelist. Apart from their religious beliefs, Swaggart's family had great love of music. His Pentecostal pastor father, Willie Leon Swaggart, who he called son, was a superb violin player. The Swaggart family lived with music. Jimmy was advised from early age to maximize his gift, particularly at church. He sung and sang gospel music at church events as a young kid. Music was not just for entertainment, but also a significant component of worship. Early on, Swaggart's ministry would revolve mostly on spiritual music, as he often sang gospel songs during his lectures. Swaggart's family included more than simply his musically gifted father. He hailed from a quite well-known family. Notable were two cousins Jerry Lee Lewis, who helped establish rock and roll, and Mickey Gilley, a country music legend. While Jerry Lee Lewis and Mickey Gilley were drawn to secular music, Jimmy Swaggart remained faithful to gospel music and used his talents to praise God rather than pursuing mainstream music industry celebrity. Their passion of music bonded the cousin, but their paths would soon deviate when Jimmy decided to be a preacher rather than a celebrity. Swaggart sensed a greater calling even if secular music would have brought him plenty of money. At 17, he made another major decision in 1952 that would shape his life going forward. He wed Pentecostal church member Frances Anderson from Wisner, Louisiana. Frances comes from a pious household, just like Jimmy did. Their connection endured because of their same religion. Early on in their marriage, they struggled with money as they were destitute and relied on odd employment and the generosity of other Christians to survive. Jimmy had to speak and sing at little churches all across the South, so they traveled around a lot. Often they lived with members of their congregation or in church basements. When they initially married, the Swaggarts struggled with money. Nonetheless, they remained faithful to one another and their religion. Later, Jimmy Swaggart offered his testimony using this period of sacrifice and struggle. In his lectures, he often discussed it to inspire people to believe that God would provide. Swaggart spent his life knowing that God had called him to deliver the gospel, even if it meant passing up opportunities to be affluent and well-known. When Sun Records extended Swaggart a recording deal, it was among the most significant events in his early life. This same label had made his relative Jerry Lee Lewis well-known. Though Swaggart rejected down the opportunity because he knew his purpose was to preach, it promised steady income and the possibility of worldwide celebrity. He believed that God had selected him to be a preacher and that working in secular music would cause him to focus less on his main objective. Swaggart made a crucial decision that would help him to become among the most well-known evangelical preachers in the United States. During these early years, he was resolved to serve God regardless of circumstances. His religion, music, and songs defined him personally. Early events molded him into the potent preacher he would become, whose love of the gospel would finally touch millions of people. Growing up pious, gifted in music, and suffering through difficult events as a youngster gave him a strong sense of direction that would help him become well-known nationally as a televangelist in the years to come. Swaggart's early success would soon be challenged by the hard reality of living on the road and his dedication to a greater calling as his faith and musical ability developed. Struggles and early career. Jimmy Swaggart and Frances Anderson encountered considerable hardship during their initial years of marriage. The couple was experiencing financial hardship due to their meager earnings of $30 per week. They were perpetually on the move and frequently resided in motels, church basements, or the residences of other Christians who were so kind as to accommodate them. Although these were challenging times, they also played a role in our development. Donnie was the son of Jimmy and Frances, and the small family was familiar with the experience of living on the road. Jimmy's extreme poverty was a perpetual issue, despite his efforts to secure odd employment in order to make ends meet. No matter what transpired, Swaggart maintained his devotion to his faith and his vocation as a preacher. He would ultimately achieve great success as a result of the resilience he developed as a result of these early challenges, which enabled him to confront numerous challenges throughout his life. Swaggart believed that God had a purpose for him, despite the fact that he lacked financial resources and safety. This conviction sustained him during the early years of uncertainty and hardship. Swaggart was presented with an opportunity that would significantly alter his life in the mid-1950s. Jerry Lee Lewis, his cousin, had already achieved success in the rock and roll industry while working for Sun Records. Swaggart was extended an invitation to become a member of the label's roster by Sam Phillips, the label's creator. The offer appeared to have the potential to generate substantial financial gain, prominence, and assistance in alleviating poverty. Phillips observed Swaggart's musical abilities and believed that he had the potential to become a gospel sensation. Nevertheless, the opportunity would also entail a transition to secular music. Swaggart's decision to decline the offer was motivated by his profound sense of purpose. He was of the opinion that God had sent him to preach, not to perform on stage, and that attempting to achieve wealth and fame through secular music would divert him from his proper vocation. Swaggart explicitly stated that his ministry and faith would always take precedence when he declined Phillips' offer. Swaggart's existence was significantly altered by his experience. It was evident that he was opting for a spiritual path over the renown and wealth that music could provide. Swaggart's decision would prove to be both a boon and a sacrifice as time progressed. He may have achieved fame for his music, but his unwavering dedication to proclaiming and disseminating the gospel established a robust ministry. Swaggart dedicated himself entirely to his role as an evangelist in 1955. He commenced his evangelical work with a fervent desire to disseminate God's word and a donated flatbed trailer. He embarked on a mission to disseminate the gospel throughout the southern United States, despite the fact that he possessed limited resources and no official assistance. At the outset, his occupation was not particularly thrilling. He frequently delivered sermons to small gatherings of individuals in rural regions. Swaggart's enthusiasm and devotion to evangelism inspired individuals to emulate him, despite the challenges he faced. He was immediately recognized as a charismatic and impassioned preacher. His sermons were renowned for their profound impact, and his musical performances were equally captivating. Swaggart had acquired adherents and influence by the conclusion of the 1950s. This marked the beginning of a ministry that would expand significantly. The rise of his ministry. Jimmy Swaggart's spiritual life underwent a significant transformation in 1961, when the Assemblies of God formally gave him the ordination he had been seeking. Not only did these ordinations establish him as a priest in an official capacity, but they also made it possible for his ministry to expand in new directions. At the same time, Swaggart began recording gospel CDs, which would allow him to reach a greater number of people and ultimately contribute to the growth of his music career. He made it abundantly evident that he had a deep affection for gospel music, and the recordings he made enabled him to communicate with individuals who did not attend the churches where he preached in person. The music that Swaggart created was an essential component of his ministry. It was his conviction that music possessed the ability to disseminate the message of the gospel and to impact people's hearts. The records he released became well known, and by the time the decade came to a close, Swaggart had become a well-known name among evangelicals for his preaching, as well as his performing of gospel music. Setting up the Family Worship Center. Swaggart made a significant shift in the late 1960s when he opened the Family Worship Center in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. This was a significant move because Swaggart's fame continued to increase. This church would serve as the focal point of Swaggart's activities and would be the place where his congregation would make their home. Even though it started out as a small group of believers, the Family Worship Center swiftly expanded into a thriving community of people who worship as a whole. There was more to the church than just attending services on Sundays. In addition to providing a physical location for Swaggart's expanding ministry, it served as the center of his expanding outreach initiatives. Over the course of time, the Family Worship Center's position within the Pentecostal movement became more solidified as a result of its affiliation with the Assemblies of God. He became a significant voice in the evangelical community as a result of the emotional impact of gospel music and Swaggart's style of preaching, which attracted people from all over the region to him. Everything shifted at this point in time. As time went on, Swaggart transitioned from being a traveling evangelist to becoming a leader who had a permanent congregation and brought his message to a larger audience. During the 1970s, Swaggart started to recognize the potential for the media to assist him in expanding his ministry even further. Even though there were millions of individuals who might never attend church, he recognized that television had the potential to reach them. Following their appearances on weekly television shows, Swaggart's sermons began to be broadcast on local stations in the Baton Rouge media market. In a short period of time, they were broadcast on Christian radio stations scattered across the United States. The expansion of Swaggart's television ministry led to the purchase of a local AM radio station known as WLUX. This enabled him to provide a more extensive selection of Christian programs. On the station, individuals had the opportunity to listen to gospel music, hear sermons, and read news pieces related to religious topics. Additional sermons, including those delivered by Swaggart and other evangelicals, were also broadcast there. This marked the beginning of a new period in Swaggart's ministry, which began when he began working with the media. He could now communicate with people not only in churches but also in other parts of the country. The television empire. In the early 1980s, Jimmy Swaggart's television ministry was well known throughout the country. He was one of the best-known Christians in the United States. A large crowd gathered to hear his fiery lectures, magnetic personality, and combination of preaching and gospel music. Swaggart's shows aired on over 250 stations, reaching millions of people in the United States and other nations. His sermons, daily Bible studies, and weekend broadcasts became staples of many people's lives. They combined cheerful evangelical music with pleas to turn away from sin and start over spiritually. His compelling sermons resonated with both believers and those seeking spiritual advice, allowing him to develop a televangelism empire. During the 1980s, the evangelical movement in the United States expanded dramatically, and televangelism became the most popular type of religious broadcasting. Swaggart became a key player in the movement because he demonstrated how it could reach millions of people via television. His sermons were based on fundamentalist Christian ideas and emphasized sin, repentance, and salvation. Conservative Christians gathered around Swaggart because he was not ashamed to speak out against spiritual defects and moral decay. He had an impact on those outside of religion because he discussed modern social concerns and frequently spoke out against secularism, sexual promiscuity, and drug misuse, which were popular religious and cultural topics during the decade. He advocated for a return to Christian values in American society. However, Swaggart's influence extended beyond the spiritual realm. His ministry became embroiled in various contentious political problems, particularly after it was revealed that he was cooperating with the Mozambican National Resistance, a group fighting in Mozambique's civil war. According to several news sites, Swaggart's ministry provided money and other resources to Renamo, which has been accused of war crimes. Even though Swaggart's engagement was largely spiritual, the fact that his book, How to Receive the Baptism in the Holy Spirit, was discovered at Renamo's stronghold raised questions about his deeper ties to the organization. These allegations harmed Swaggart's reputation, implying that his assistance may have extended beyond spiritual instruction to include cash assistance. Despite these issues, Swaggart's ministry thrived in the 1980s, cementing his reputation as a leading televangelist. However, his moment of triumph was marred by personal issues that would later surface, resulting in his precipitous fall from popularity. Political scandals and moral faults on Swaggart's part would do significant damage to his reputation and his ministry, which was previously thriving. Still, Jimmy Swaggart's ascension to televangelism in the 1980s was a watershed moment in American evangelicalism. That was when his influence peaked, and it soon and publicly declined. At the height of Swaggart's power, a scandal broke that would change everything forever. The first scandal. Jimmy Swaggart's downfall resulted from a fight with Marvin Gorman, an Assemblies of God minister. In 1986, Swaggart accused Gorman of cheating on his wife. As a result, Gorman was sacked by the Assemblies of God, and his ministry was disbanded. This accusation would eventually work against Swaggart because it set off a chain of events that demonstrated how awful he truly was. Gorman was ashamed and enraged, so he resolved to exact revenge. He charged Swaggart with defamation, alleging that the statement harmed his career. The court case concluded with a massive verdict against Swaggart. The damages were originally set at $10 million, but were later reduced to $5 million. Gorman was not pleased with the financial deal. However, he collaborated with others to plan a sting operation to expose Swaggart's dishonesty. As part of a well-planned strategy, Gorman's son and son-in-law began spying on Swaggart because they suspected he was also doing evil things. They followed their leads to the Travel Inn in Metairie, Louisiana, and discovered evidence that Swaggart had met with Deborah Murphy, a prostitute. Gorman's team captured photos of Swaggart outside of Room 7, proving that he was cheating on his wife. With this damning proof in hand, Gorman met with Swaggart alone, hoping that the televangelist would apologize publicly in exchange for keeping the controversy secret. However, Swaggart failed to maintain his half of the bargain, and Gorman presented proof to the leaders of the Assemblies of God. The news shocked the Christian community. Swaggart became noted for his moral honesty and forceful condemnation of wrongdoing. Now he was embroiled in a massive scandal. The fallout was immediate, and the media jumped on the story, making the details of Swaggart's moral collapse all the more stunning. On February 21, 1988, Jimmy Swaggart made a heartfelt confession to his church and a national television audience. It was one of the most dramatic moments of his career. "I have sinned against you, my Lord," Swaggart exclaimed, his face twisted with sorrow. His confession, albeit it lacked specifics, was interpreted as an admission that he had done something wrong with Murphy. Many of his followers were inspired by his passionate plea for forgiveness, but it also demonstrated how vulnerable people are, including spiritual leaders. Swaggart told them his story with tears in his eyes, but the Assemblies of God were not as moved. After conducting an internal inquiry, Swaggart was suspended for 2 years for violating moral standards. Swaggart initially declined, but returned to preaching after only 3 months, contrary to what the Assemblies of God said. As a result, he was legally defrocked and his ministry was severed from the denominational fold. Even if it caused complications, Swaggart refused to leave the public eye. He renamed his ministry Jimmy Swaggart Ministries and established it as an independent entity. Even though the incident was horrific, it did not fully demolish his empire. Many of his devoted followers remained faithful to him, continuing to provide financial and spiritual support to his ministry. Second scandal and decline. The police came upon Swaggart with Rosemary Garcia, a known prostitute. as he was approaching her car. Following the incident, Garcia revealed to the public that Swaggart had sought her services. She said, "He stopped me since he asked for items. You know what I do. I assist as an escort." Her open admission highlighted that Swaggart had once more been caught acting in behavior diametrically opposite the moral principles he preached from his pulpit. Apart from legal consequences, this fresh incident seriously tarnished Swaggart's public image, particularly considering the background of his past scandal. A similar episode in 1988, when Swaggart was found with another prostitute, had already seriously tarnished his reputation. Swaggart publicly confessed at that time and asked for pardon from his congregation as well as from the general people. Many people related to his passionate apologies. Thus, some of his supporters forgave him and kept helping his ministry. But the 1991 scandal told another tale. Swaggart's response was strikingly different and significantly less contrite than another sincere confession would have been. Swaggart took a protective and contemptuous attitude toward his church after the 1991 event. "The Lord informed me it's flat none of your concern," he told his followers. This quick and direct answer stood in strong contrast to his earlier emotionally heated one. It mirrored Swaggart's change in approach to his scandals. Swaggart seemed to take a more closed-off attitude, suggesting a major change in his public interaction when he lost interest in publicly defending or justifying his activities. Swaggart's ministry was profoundly affected by the 1991 controversy. The bad consequences of the occurrence were far more serious than those of the 1988 affair. Local TV stations that had earlier kept running Swaggart sermons following the first crisis now cut their relations with him. Unwilled to be connected with another issue involving Swaggart, the media ceased airing his sermons, therefore drastically lowering his public profile. Apart from the loss of media backing, contributions to Swaggart's ministry fell drastically. Many of the people who had forgiven him initially were now disappointed and felt deceived by his continuous behavior. Attending his family worship center in Baton Rouge also dropped as people started to doubt their allegiance to a leader whose reputation had been constantly tarnished. Once a major player in televangelism, and with millions of adherents worldwide, the ministry was now in turmoil. Jimmy Swaggart's son, Donnie Swaggart, became more involved in the fallout from the affair. Speaking from the pulpit in his father's absence, he addressed the audience with a solemn note on the gravity of the matter. Donnie said his father will be temporarily leaving his leadership post to get treatment and deal with his underlying problems. This statement underlined the seriousness of the matter and the need of Swaggart to own his mistakes and ask help for his personal problems. Donnie tried to steady the ministry, but the damage was already rather significant. The second episode seriously tarnished Swaggart's reputation and betrayed the confidence of many of his supporters. The ministry could not keep its former degree of impact and scope. Swaggart's choice to take a more defensive and less emotionally transparent stance in the face of the crisis just served to alienate his supporters even more. Swaggart kept active in ministry following the controversy, although his influence was much reduced. Now a ghost of his former self, the once powerful televangelist who had commanded a sizable following and been a major player in Christian television, was his public reputation. Fell, and the challenges of his ministry acted as a sobering reminder of how even the most powerful leaders may be toppled by their own behavior. Particularly in the field of televangelism, Swaggart's narrative is a warning about the dangers of power, vanity, and moral faults. Though lessened, Swaggart's ministry continued. Controversies permanently changed his complicated legacy of religion. Attempts at recovery. Jimmy Swaggart had to begin from the very beginning when he took over his ministry, following the scandal-filled years that occurred in the late 1980s and early 1990s. In spite of the fact that his credibility had been seriously undermined, Swaggart was resolute in his commitment to continue spreading the gospel messages. The first thing he did to get better was to relaunch Jimmy Swaggart Ministries, which is now independent from the Assemblies of God, and will concentrate on Bible study programs as well as smaller groups that are more personal in nature. One of the most significant things that Swaggart achieved during this period was to establish the Sun Life Broadcasting Network, sometimes known as SBN, which is a Christian television and radio network that operates around the clock. It was because of the network that Swaggart was able to resume his work in the field of Christian broadcasting. As a result, he was able to continue preaching and communicate with people from all over the world. It had been a considerable amount of time since Swaggart had a nationwide audience on more than 250 stations, but SBN assisted him in developing a more devoted and focused audience throughout that time. Studying the Bible, teaching the Bible in depth, and playing Christian music were the primary focuses of the programming that were broadcast on SBN. This was a departure from Swaggart's early television ministries, which were characterized by a greater emphasis on drama and emotion. People who were yearning for spiritual sustenance were the target audience for his new shows, such as A Study in the Word, which were aimed at a more limited and devout audience. Due to the fact that scandals had damaged Swaggart's reputation, he was able to keep his ministry continuing with the assistance of this change in strategy. In spite of the fact that he did not receive as many followers as he did in the past, the smaller but more devoted fan base that he established in the aftermath of the controversies positioned him for a substantial role in Christian media. The establishment of World Evangelism Bible College, also known as WEBC, was an additional significant component of Swaggart's attempt to improve his situation. At the time of its founding in the late 1980s, the World Evangelical Baptist Convention, WEBC, was intended to function as a Bible college that educated new pastors and ministers on Pentecostal beliefs and how to disseminate the gospel. As an evangelical leader, Swaggart saw WEBC as a vehicle to teach the leaders of the churches of the future, which would enrich his reputation as a leader in the evangelical movement. The controversies that shook Swaggart's ministry, on the other hand, had a significant impact on the amount of people who signed up for the college. Between the aftermath of the scandals that occurred between 1988 and 1991, a significant number of students left college because they were dissatisfied with the lack of morals exhibited by their mentor. As a result of the steady decline in student enrollment, the World Education and Business Council, WEBC, struggled to maintain its reputation as a reputable institution for religious education. As a result of the declining number of students, the college was forced to reduce the number of programs it offered and lay off teaching members. Even in the face of these obstacles, Swaggart continued to operate, and WEBC continued to function, albeit on a more limited scale. There was a continuation of the college's degree programs in theology and Christian ministry. Swaggart was able to continue to exert influence over future church leaders through it, despite the fact that it never achieved the same level of popularity as it did before the controversy. The lower size of WEBC was a reflection of what Swaggart's ministry actually looked like after the scandal, a more focused and smaller organization with a committed following, albeit a smaller one. Legacy and ongoing impact. In spite of the fact that Jimmy Swaggart's professional life was marred by controversies, his family continues to carry on his work in the ministry. Gabriel Swaggart, his grandson, and Donnie Swaggart, his son, have both become very influential in the ministry, ensuring that the Swaggart name continues to be significant in evangelical circles. Donnie Swaggart has done a lot of the same things that his father did, including preaching at the Family Worship Center and making regular appearances on shows that are broadcast on the Sun Life Broadcasting Network. Gabriel Swaggart is the leader of Crossfire, the youth ministry of Family Worship Center, which has gained a lot of popularity among young people. As a member of the Swaggart family, he is the third generation to find employment in the ministry. In a world of Christian evangelism that is always evolving, the Swaggart family has been able to maintain their relevance because to his innovative and enjoyable approach to youth ministry. In spite of the fact that they were implicated in the controversy, the Swaggarts have demonstrated an incredible amount of resilience by continuing to disseminate their message of faith. Also playing a significant role in the Swaggart family's ministry is Frances Swaggart, who is married to James Swaggart. Frances remained by her husband's side during the controversies and his attempts to recover, and she also provided her voice to the ministry. As a result of her television show, Francis and Friends, which is shown on SBN and serves as a forum for discussing topics such as family, faith, and current affairs. Her life continues to be full of activity. Her unflinching support has been important in maintaining the ministry's stability and in ensuring that the Swaggart legacy is carried on. In spite of the fact that Swaggart may not be as influential as he once was, his media presence is still rather strong as a result of continuously broadcasting his content. The Jimmy Swaggart telecast continues to air on a consistent basis, providing individuals with spiritual teachings and lessons from the Bible. Another popular program on SBN is called A Study in the Word, and it too provides a great deal of information regarding the Bible. Even though there are fewer people watching these shows than there were in the past, they continue to have an impact on the lives of those who are devoted to them. In addition to its work with the media, Jimmy Swaggart Ministries continues to be involved in philanthropic work and programs that help people in need. There have been instances where the ministry has provided assistance to orphanages, disaster relief efforts, and various outreach projects in countries such as Mexico, Haiti, and Uganda. Through the implementation of these initiatives, Swaggart's ministry continues to provide assistance to communities that are in need, thereby extending their mission of compassion and love all across the world. However, despite the fact that the controversy irrevocably altered Jimmy Swaggart's career, his ministry continues to exist. The legacy that he left behind was a complicated one, involving faith, scandal, and redemption. This man's narrative, which contains both happy and tragic aspects, demonstrates how important faith in the media can be in molding not only the lives of individuals, but also entire religious movements. That concludes our tale. As we prepare to depart, we would appreciate it if you could share your opinions with us in the comments box below this video. We are extremely grateful that you are here with us. I will see you in the following videos that are interesting.